All right, so again, I'm BJ Kuntz. I work here at the office and will be part of the call today and sort of facilitating. We have sort of 3 agenda items. Don't anticipate that this will take too long. Agenda item number 1 is, as you probably know, we are hitting the end of fall sports and starting to kind of ramp up winter sports. And we want to help make sure that you are fully prepared if you have teams that happen to make it to postseason, to make sure you're doing what you need to do on your end to get your teams registered appropriately and pass gates and those kind of things that could be hot button items if you don't get those done correctly. Secondly, we're going to talk to you a little bit about getting your teams nominated for different awards. We just want to make sure that you have that a little bit on your radar. And then the third thing is Justin is ramping up a little COVID reminders for you. And then we will be available for any Q&As you might have. So please know that any questions you might have, this is an open opportunity for you to ask them. They definitely do not have to be around the topics that we are going to present. So I'm going to invite my coworker, Casey Johnson. He does a lot of the work around building the state programs and pass gates and those kind of things. So he's going to try to get you prepared for postseason things. Feel free to put questions in the chat or we will ask things as time allows. Thanks, Case.
Are you seeing this, my WIAA screen? Perfect. Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the process for state tournament registration. And when I say that, it's really a twofold process, or it's for 2 purposes, I should say. And the first is the pass gate. When we refer to the pass gate, we mean generally how you get in to the event, both for your athletes, coaches, and any kind of administrative personnel that are going to be at the event. So you can do that by going into your MyWIAA account, and under My School, you'll see Verify My Passgate. And this will take you to a drop down, a list of sports. Let's start with cross country. So you'll see this listing of school personnel. It'll start with coaches. And this is pulling directly from the coaches that you've verified in your MyWIAA system. Don't be confused. We'll talk about rosters a little bit later, but this is coming from our system. So if you're using VNN, let's say you have coaches entered in there, that's going to be completely different. We're pulling what you have entered in your MyWIAA account as far as coaches. So you'll see coaches, you'll see school board members, which can get into state events, your AD, your district AD, superintendent. So all these things. So just give us a once over. This should be auto-populating, but you do have the ability to click on any of these boxes. You could delete for that event, or you could enter someone that's not already in your account. So this will be important information for allowing these personnel to get into the state tournament event, as well as we'll pull some of this information to be on your state tournament program page. Down below, so this is cross country, and this is the same with any kind of individual event. So cross country, track and field, swimming. We, in the state tournament program, we use individual headshots and try to represent all of the athletes that are participating at state. So here is where you can do that. You could type in a name, hit the save button. And you come back down. You can do multiple names at one time. Hit save, and then you'll see this little option to upload a photo. So you click that button, and then you can add an image here, and then you'll save that. So pretty simple process. That display when you upload, it can look a little weird, but don't worry, our system will resize the photo and crop it automatically. So it may look like it's taking up the whole screen. Don't worry about that. They'll all come in the same size. So this is, again, this is for individual sports, cross country, most importantly this fall, and girls swimming. So let's go to a sport like a team sport. So we'll say football. Again, you have the sort of the same thing, coaches up top, come down to all the other admin like you would on the individual page. And then this is going to be something that we haven't developed quite yet, is the integration with VNN. We're hoping this will be up and running within the week. So if you're a VNN school and use VNN for your website, there's a little button when you go into your roster center that says sync to VNN. I'm sure if you're a VNN school, you've already used that. What Mark Martin is going to add right next to that sync to VNN is going to be a sync to WIAA button. And so that's going to send your roster information into our Passgate system right here with just that one click of the button. So working on integrating that, Mark and our developer have been talking, and that's sort of getting ironed out. Should be up and running by fall championships here. For non-VNN schools, if Mark is gonna create a profile for you in his roster center system, so you can log in, enter your roster, and then again hit that sync to WIA button, and that'll come to us like a normal VNN school. I'll throw Mark Martin's email in the chat. So any of you, if you're not a VNN school currently, you can reach out to him. He'll get you set up and sort of walk you through the roster center as well. Then the final thing on the Passgate is going to be schedules and scores. These are coming in automatically from Arbiter. So there's really nothing you need to do here. These will be automatically populated. If you see anything wrong here, that's a sign to check your Arbiter page. These will be listed in the tournament program as they're listed here. So make sure these are correct. I didn't mention team photo. A team photo will be with the rosters. That'll be on that roster center with Mark Martin at WPA/VNN. So you'll upload your roster and your photo there. That'll automatically come to us. So this is it. This is really how you register your personnel, your rosters for Passgates and state tournament programs. The last step in this process for programs is as you qualify and that Sunday after district qualification, I'll pull all this information, put it into the state tournament program, and I'll send a draft of your team page to both you and your head coach. And you'll have about 24 hours, maybe a little less, to proof that roster page with all the information I have. We can make any last minute edits you need. And then I'll send that off to the printer. That's a quick turnaround. So be looking for that email if you qualify for a state event. It'll come probably Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening with your team information and any last minute edits. So that's really all I have for Passgates. Is there any questions about this?
Casey, there's one in the chat. If the VNN has issues, can they just go directly to the Passgate like you showed to enter?
Well, that could cause confusion with the system. We don't anticipate any problems with the WPA roster center. I mean, that should be the old system that's always been used. If there's any issues, if you're having specific issues with the WPA roster system, then reach out to me. And I would rather probably do that manually on a case-by-case basis than try to have our system read both syncing with VNN and manually being input. So if you're having troubles with WPA, we should get that worked out. So reach out to me and then you can maybe send me your roster manually and I can input it that way.
Casey, what if they have a change of student, if they decide to swap out a couple of students for state tournament? Is there anything special they would need to do that?
Not well. You can sync your roster at any time. So if you hit sync before district, something happens at the district qualifying, you need to switch someone out. You can make that change in your WPA roster center. And then just hit sync to WI again, that'll automatically refresh and update. If for some reason there's a very, very last second change, you should catch that in the proofing process. When I send you that team page, you can give me an edit there. One thing to note that I get some questions on is that the roster you provide for the state tournament program is not an official roster. So whatever roster limitations there are for that sport do not apply if you want someone to be recognized, someone that's a part of your team got injured halfway through the season. You want to put them on the roster, but they're not going to be playing and taking up a roster spot. That's fine. They can be added on the roster. Just either leave them on the VNN roster page or send that to me in the proofing process for that last minute update, and I can add it there.
Great. Casey, from your experience, where would an AD kind of get themselves in some trouble if they mess up their pass gate? What are some of the common bumps, or maybe some of the other staff can help with that? But
yeah, I may rely on maybe the assistant execs to help with that one, because I have a feeling the most common problem is upon entry, and I don't know too much about that. I don't know, Cindy or Andy, do you see common hiccups there?
Well, I can say that one of the issues that occurs far more often than it should is when the school profile is updated. It might still have your superintendent from 5 years ago that's no longer there listed. That usually ends up being kind of a sore spot to the current superintendent when they see that program. So make sure that your correct superintendent and school board member, I think the school board on there too, Casey, because that's part of the pass gate. Casey mentioned you can have more people listed in the program than what are allowed by rule. It's important that you know what the roster limits are for each one of the team sports. And that is in the bound for state regulations specifically for that sport. So like for volleyball, you can bring 14 players and 6 coaches, managers, scorekeepers, whatever. If you have more than that, your school's going to be billed. So you just need to know. Anyway.
Casey, would you mind showing them where to see the bound for state guidelines and the sport guidelines real quick?
Yeah, so under state tournaments, we have this bound for state regulations. This will be a compilation of all the different sports. So you can click on access any of the different sport bound for states on this page. And then is there something else?
Yes. Yeah, go to state tournaments and tournament information. And that's where you can find the coaches packets for each of the state tournaments with more detailed information. Great.
DJ, I think I'd also just kind of echo what Cindy was saying with the roster limitations, is just making sure that your coaches that are supposed to be there are on there. This comes up for me a lot in wrestling, where additional coaches come and they think they're supposed to be on the pass list, and then they're not, and then they get angry, and we have to, Carl and I have to kind of calm them down a little bit and then tell them that we're going to charge them extra for being there. So it's really just, you know, some mistakes that can be curbed by just double checking those pieces and those components to make sure that everybody that's on your staff that's supposed to be on there is on there. And then just communicating with somebody that if they're not going to be on that list, why they're not going to be on that list, and let them know ahead of time so that they don't show up at the event thinking they're supposed to be on there when they're not. So just watch those roster limits, and then make sure that everybody gets on there that's supposed to be.
Sometimes it bumps in when you have like student photographers, managers, those kind of people that either travel with the team or sometimes travel separately, and they think that they would also be on a pass gate list. So you just want to really confirm that you have a good list and share that with your coach, and so they're aware of who's going to be able to get in and not.
I want to jump into where you've got, because you've shown here the coaches packets. ADs, that's important that you read through that. It's really information that your school needs to be aware of. It's more than just what the coaches need to know about specific, just about warm-up times and home and away jerseys and that kind of thing. So I would encourage all of you to make sure that you look through that too.
Where's the best place to find the roster limitations for each sport?
In the bound for state regulations.
For each sport, or on the general bound for state?
It's by sport, in each sport.
There you go, Josh. Any other questions that you can think of around kind of preparing for state tournaments? Okay, when you do refer to that AD calendar on the front of the My WIAA, there are deadlines and sort of reminders. So just keep an eye on those so you don't miss a deadline to get those up to date. Okay, we're going to tap over to Aaron in our office, who is involved in a lot of our awards programs, and he wants to give you a couple of updates and reminders on our awards.
Yeah, thank you, BJ. I just wanted to highlight some of our awards that we offer. Casey, if you could hover over nominate. We have different awards for our administration, recognizing our leaders, students, coaches, and officials. So the Gareth Giles and the WIAA Hall of Fame, both are options. You can click through there and get the criteria. And then we have Team of the Month for contributions for a team that would perform well and then have some community-based services. Then one of our weekly events is our Athlete of the Week. We offer 12 winners per week, and those are based off of statistics and contributions to the team. So you can put that on your weekly reminder to get those done. You can nominate weekly, and we're looking to spread that award across to a bunch of schools and different locations in the state. The main thing that I would like to highlight is our Scholastic Awards program. Casey, if you want to click in that. This program is really important to a lot of communities. It recognizes and honors those teams and groups that maintain a high collective academic standard, and it's open to varsity and sub-varsity sports. And it's a two-part program that involves our Scholastic team certificates and awards and our academic state champions. We have due dates for academic state champions, which the reason that we're highlighting this today is because we have a due date coming up on Friday. So our due dates are October, January, February, and April. And they're based off of our state tournaments because we honor our academic state champions at the specific state tournament. And so those in line with that. The Scholastic program, it's for any team has an average of 3.0 or higher, and it's based off of a 4.0 scale. Teams that qualify from a 3.0 to 3.49 are a distinguished team, and a team with average of 3.5 to 4.0 is our outstanding team. The team with the highest average for its activities or classification is recognized as the academic state champion. When you go in and submit your teams, you will fall in a category of outstanding or distinguished depending on your GPA, and the WIAA will send a certificate to honor that team. So that will be sent directly to the athletic director. And then there is an option in there to be able to order individual certificates and individual letterman's patches if you'd like to do that. Certificates are 50 cents a piece, and our insignia patches are $1. So those are good options for high schools and middle schools if they want to recognize the individual of the teams, but not only the teams. Just a great community-based program so that it's able to incorporate both the students and the teams into the school.
Thank you, Aaron. That's awesome. Any questions for Aaron on these awards? Perfect. We just don't want anybody to miss out on the academic that are coming up this week. So just a quick reminder. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.
Okay, I am going to hand the microphone over to the COVID guru, the director of all the undesirables, Justin Kesterson, in our office. So he can just give you a little update, and then we'll do any Q&As you all might have.
I think by now everybody's a COVID professional at this point, but I think that there's a couple of things that we continue to get questions about here in the office. specific around COVID and really kind of leading up to the winter sports season and what that looks like for many of you with your winter sports. So I think everybody kind of understands the masking policy and stuff as it is right now, and where we're at currently with the mandates and what testing looks like. But I think it's always good to cover this a little bit more in depth. So when you're looking at your winter sports, it is your high risk and high aerosol sports that require testing. So it's going to be your basketball and wrestling programs from the sports standpoint, and then your cheerleading programs from the high aerosol standpoint. If you have water polo, then your water polo team's also included in there, but we don't sanction water polo, so we're a little bit more hands-off in that conversation around water polo, but they also have to be tested. So the biggest thing to keep in mind is that the way the policy is written is very confusing. I won't say it's a little confusing, it's very confusing. And so the biggest things to clear up is that testing has to be done at minimum twice a week. So once you start your tryout process, so I had a question the other day from a school district that said, can we start the testing process after tryouts take place? And we said no, because in theory, testing or tryouts are part of the practice requirements. And so even though you might have 70, 80 kids on the first day of tryouts, you have to test in the lead up to that. And then there's the 3 to 4 day gap. Well, most programs for basketball will run their tryouts for 3 days and then make cuts down to their final roster. So you're really only testing that giant number once per team for the season. And then you get down into your 30, 35, 40 count, depending on how many teams you run and how many roster spots you have. So at minimum, you're going to be testing twice a week in those sports. And then once you get into your competitions, the way the guidelines are written, it says within 24 hours of the competition, and then in multi-day events, testing should occur before each day of competition. So we've gone back to make sure we get clarification. And I wasn't in the meeting today, so Andy's going to help clarify this to make sure that I am saying this right, that each day of competition you're expected to test, whether it's a multi-day event or whether it's back-to-back basketball games. Andy, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so that goes back to kind of what the language was last year during the wrestling season when testing first went into place. So the information on the website is goofy because that's the way they've written it. So that's why we've gotten clarification again. So each day of competition, you will need to make sure that you're testing your kids in that sport or within that 24-hour period from the game time. So if your game starts at 7 o'clock on Thursday and your team's practicing late on Wednesday, you can in theory test them if it's after 7 o'clock on Wednesday and have that test carry through to the next day. So those are the biggest things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to the testing piece. And then you're going to have to make sure that if you're going and sending your basketball team to a tournament over the holidays, and it's a 2-day tournament, you need to send test kits with them, and the coaches or somebody's going to have to test them at the hotel or before they get into the venue and show up for that. So they have to make sure that they test each of those days. And so that, again, is the way that it's written, a little goofy, but that's the clarification from our end. I think the other one is just around who has to test and making sure that everybody understands. Unvaccinated students have to test. Vaccinated students do not have to test. All right, so there's a clear delineation and there's no exemptions for that. Activities is exempt from the exemptions. And so if you have students that have religious reasons or anything like that, the exemptions don't carry over, is our understanding for the testing policy. So they have to go through testing or they have to be vaccinated in order to participate. They can't just wear a mask to forego the testing component. That's something else that a lot of people are misunderstanding. So a mask cannot just be worn to excuse them from the testing piece. The only other situation that occurs with testing is if you have a student who has tested positive for COVID in the last 90 days from the date of whenever the competition's occurring or whatever, if they have to have gone to a doctor, a medical doctor, and for our purposes, we would use the medical licenses that are referred to for physicals. They would have to go to a doctor and have a note and a confirmed PCR test that confirms that they did in fact have COVID. And then they have a 90-day window for when that occurred, and they would not have to test in that 90-day window. Once that 90-day window is expired, they have to begin the testing protocol. So we're starting to get a lot of questions from parents mostly, but some ADs that are asking about antibodies and kids that have had COVID before and what that looks like. So that's the answer to that. That is in our FAQ. And so if you go to the COVID page, there's a frequently asked question link. Go in there, and I've been trying to update that whenever we get questions, just to make sure that we're answering those, and there are a lot of common questions that are in there. So use that as a resource, and we'll continue to update that as there's updates or if we get really good questions that kind of come up multiple times. I think those are kind of the two biggest highlights. So let me go in here to the chat. What about cheer when they attend cheer at every basketball and wrestling? Yeah. So likewise, cheerleaders, they have to test before every performance, anything that they do. So if they're going to be at 3 or 4 basketball games that week, they're going to test 3 or 4 times during that week. So anytime they have a performance, they have to test. If they're going to do a performance during the school day, they would have to test. If you're asking about cheer roster limit, oh, that's Cindy. Disregard that. What happens in the 2-day tournament situation? On day 1, students test negative, and on the second day, an athlete tests positive. How do the coaches handle that? So you're going to have to have a protocol in place from your school side of things, because if a kid tests positive, they can't be in that venue. And so there needs to be, that's one thing that as we go into the winter seasons, your school districts are going to have a policy. You're probably going to have a second coach, potentially, that drives a van over in case that happens, or have an extra hotel room ready if the kid has to isolate over in that room. There's some different things that have to be thought about, but that's certainly a scenario that can arise, but schools are going to have a plan for that. I think the only other thing that I would add into this is making sure that everybody's aware that your coaches also have to test. So if they're unvaccinated, which, even if they have one of the exemptions that exempts them from getting the vaccination, they will still have to test in order to coach in their sport. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that your unvaccinated coaches would need to do the testing regimen as well.
Just real quick question. If I have a coach that's also a teacher that's getting tested because they are under an accommodation, are they still needing to also test the day of the competition, or do they get to fall under like a once a week type of thing like our school's doing?
How often is your school testing?
They are deciding that based on testing kits right now. So that's a big question.
I would say that the way that the guidelines are written, they would need a test before each competition.
Okay, no problem.
Because then they're going into a venue and they're interacting with other coaches and other athletes from the other schools. So I would say that they would fall in line with that same protocol.
Awesome.
And I think that's another point that I wanted to bring up too, is the testing piece. So just so that everybody's aware, if you are in the return to learn process with the Health Commons Project through the DOH, they have secured a second test, and there's now information in the toolkit that's on our website, and we'll send out some information around this today or tomorrow. But they have also done an outreach from their side. So if you're not the point of contact for your school, your principal, your school nurse, whoever that is, has probably received this already. But there's a second test that it's called Access Bio, and they have a different name for the test itself, but that's the company that has them. And so they are confident that with this acquisition of these additional tests, that they'll be able to fulfill all of the testing needs of all of our schools that are in that program. And so they now, in addition to Binax, now have this second test. And so they feel like that they will be able to supply the schools with the needed tests, while Binax kind of gets their supply line replenished and back up to full speed. So they have that second set of tests now to help with that process. So hopefully there won't be any shortages. Are they still wearing masks even if they test? No. So, well, let me back up. No, when they're actively competing or in practice. And so when your basketball team is out on the floor, the 5 boys or girls that are on the floor would not have a mask on. Everybody that's on the bench needs to be masked up. If you're a wrestler, whoever is wrestling out on the mat, mask off. But once they come back to the chairs on the side of the mat, they need to have their masks on. If they're warming up, and this goes for pregame warmups as well, they should be masked up. That's our understanding of that. A couple of tips for you would be that I would still probably, I mean, it's hard and I get it, the masks are uncomfortable, but as far as a contact tracing standpoint, you might want to have conversations with your coaches about masking during practice because the close contact language actually allows for more time as a close contact if everybody's masked up. So it's just a consideration to think about. We put that in the wrestling rules clinic as well as the basketball rules clinic. So to give coaches a thought process to think about. So if you do have a kid that tests positive, then the rest of their teammates at least are not going to be in a full exposure, or at least gives them some time, some increased time for that close contact tracing, and it goes a little bit beyond the 15 minutes within the 24 hours as outlined. So just some things to consider. So the way great question, Janika. The way the guidelines are written, and after conversations with the DOH, a second test cannot offset the false or a positive. And so if there's a thought that there is a false positive, they would have to go get a PCR to confirm that they're negative or positive. And so once they test positive, then they would have to go to a clinic to get a test that can actually test. So the PCR test really is kind of the most common to confirm that. So they will not be able to have a second test done. You know, last year during wrestling, to start off, it was you test, wait your 15 minutes. If you had a positive, you could test again. And if it was negative, you could take that. The DOH has gotten away from that because it was actually against CDC guidelines in one of the actions where they're actually following the CDC recommendation. Any other questions? Okay.
We're going to open it up to any questions that any of the ADs may have related to the topics or not. You're welcome to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask if you can think of anything that.
I did have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry, my headphones are kind of funky right now. So I heard it a little bit, but then somebody came in my office for the VNN roster situation. So I just put a bunch of all of my rosters into the into the roster center. And then it says sync to VNN. And I did that and it didn't do it. And then I remember reading an email saying, oh, there might be an issue with that, like one of the frequently asked questions from Mark, I think. So is that being resolved? Has that been resolved? Like, it's one of the things that kind of is contention with my coaches. They're like, we want rosters. I'm like, I'm working on it.
Well, I guess that's the first time that I've heard that integration isn't working. I would hope that's being resolved. We're having frequent communication with Mark, so I can ask about that and getting that resolved. But I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if that's a VNN issue and not necessarily a roster center issue. I can check more on that, but I don't know. But if this is basically the system's not working, we're gonna find a different way to do rosters. But from what I've heard, the roster center is where most schools have their rosters already. So we're just trying to eliminate any kind of duplicate entry. So we'll do some testing and get that up and running for the bulk of the fall championships and test it out. But honestly, I don't know if I can speak too much about it because that's the first I've heard of it.
And then
They
also,
say
is it
that Lindsay said that she talked to Mark and thinks it might be resolved.
okay? I'll go back and check mine. And then so I know that there's a way to do the rosters. Is there a way to get like coaches information in there as well? Or do we have to do that through the VNN admin?
So at least for our purposes, for any pass gate or state tournament program purposes, any kind of admin information is going to come from your MyWIAA account. It's not going to come from your VNN roster. But again, I mean, that'd be a question for Mark, and as he's developed that whole roster center. I just don't know the ins and outs of it enough. I know you can add coaches and administrators, but without being an AD, I'm not the one in there, but I know you can.
On Roster Center, you can add them under staff and credits when you go to the specific roster. It's like a menu option at the top of your roster in there.
Yeah, I've added it there, but then when you go into VNN, like my coaches want to be able to go to a VNN and look up coaches, like for a coach's email address, or even if my kids want to go in and be like, oh, I need to email my coach, they can't go to the VNN unless I create a page for it. And so I was just wondering if there's an easier, quicker way to do it, similar to Roster Center. I know you can add your coaches and staff into Roster Center, but it doesn't necessarily translate over to VNN.
Yeah, I think Mark is really going to be your contact for that as sort of the owner-operator of WPA Roster Center and now employee of VNN. He's going to be the person to talk to for stuff like that.
Good questions. Good questions. Anything else that we can answer today? Anything any of our staff members feel is timely that they want to mention?
Hey, I came on late, I apologize. Heard a lot of information. The only thing I can say to all of you is new ADs, you've come in probably in the toughest time of athletic administration that we'll face in our lifetime, hopefully. And there's a ton of things to do. I would say don't get bogged down. Give yourself some space and grace when you miss a step somewhere. Reach out, have a wide network of people to help, and just anything you're doing, just make sure you're doing the right thing for kids. The adults will pressure you and put all the pain points in play, but the kids are why we're here. And I don't say that just to say it. I mean, that is why we're here. And that night, you can have your coaches mad at you because they don't have rosters. You can have parents mad at you because you didn't fire a coach. You can have officials mad at you because you didn't get them the right water in their room. But at the end of the day, if the kids are good, we're good. And so give yourself that space and grace as you're trying to remember a million details every single day. So appreciate you taking the time to come on with our team.
Thanks, Mick. Bo, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys are still planning on, like, for a team that goes to state, if they end up getting in quarantine, are you guys encouraging schools that are in like that third place spot to stay prepared in case they need to fill that spot? Like, is that something that's still happening? What's the philosophy on that, I guess?
Cindy, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, and then I'll let, if Mick has anything to add. I know Mick is going to do a 2-minute drill on that very topic because the board just approved a policy for that. So you all will get a little bit of a jump on it because we haven't posted it yet, but we're planning to do it today. I think if it's more than 3 days prior to the start of the event, the district needs to be prepared to bump up the next team that would have qualified. But if it's less than 3 days before the event starts or after it starts, that position will go unfilled. So we don't want you all to have to keep your kids that were the next team qualified hanging on the ledge, holding out hope against hope that they're going to get to do it. So there is a timeline there that should be helpful.
Thanks, Cindy. Any other questions?
Yeah, is there any guidance on hotel rooms and what we want, if there's a limitation for a certain amount of kids in hotel rooms for state competitions? Or is that based on our school district policies?
I would recommend you work with your school district on how they would like you to handle that. Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Okay, sold. I'm going to stop recording.